Good evening and welcome to the board meeting for the Civilian Police Oversight Agency. Today is Thursday, January 9th. It is a little after 5, I believe, but we're going to go on ahead and call this meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Joanne Fine.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Joanne. Mission statement for the Board for the Civilian Police Oversight Agency is advancing constitutional policing and accountability for APD in the Albuquerque community. Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Do we need to make any changes?
I move we approve the agenda as drafted.
Okay. Does there anybody have any issues with that? Then we're,
I second.
okay. All in favor? Aye. Next item on the agenda is public comment. We have one public comment, Michael Parrish. Welcome, sir, and just, I don't believe I've seen you before, so
Not yet.
I'll let you know. You've got 3 minutes for your public comment, at which time a little alarm's gonna go off to let you know your time's up, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Last year, I filed a complaint with the CPOA against an APD supervisor who I witnessed violate multiple APD policies regarding untruthfulness at an administrative hearing up in Santa Fe in 2015. I didn't know your agency existed until 2 years ago, so that's why you've never seen me before and I never filed it earlier. I got a letter from Mr. Harness stating that his office, quote, can only investigate perjury complaints if the allegation is brought forth by a judicial officer. Even then, perjury is a crime and we have no jurisdiction to investigate criminal offenses, end quote. However, I called his office prior to filing the complaint and a lady who I spoke to said if it's criminal, it goes directly to the chief. Apparently that never happened. So I filed an appeal providing evidence of APD SOP violations regarding untruthfulness and dishonesty, in which there were more than 20 counts of untruthfulness during that day, and the appeal was still denied. Now, I highly doubt that the members of this board are okay with a sworn APD officer lying to a hearing officer and prosecutor from the AG's office. So, Mr. Harness, can you please tell me as board members why you didn't investigate the supervisor who's actually sitting with us today for these SOP violations regarding untruthfulness and dishonesty?
Do you, by any chance, have that CPC number?
CPC, I believe it's 95-19, I believe.
Okay. Director Harness, do you recall this case?
Chair Galloway, this is public comment, and I don't feel it's appropriate for me to discuss a case that this board has ruled on twice.
Okay. But you recall the case? Just for my own.
Chair Galloway, yes, I recall the case.
Okay. All righty. Mr. Parrish, I'll take a look at that and review it. I don't recall it off the top of my head.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I believe I received the notice from, it was denied in July of this
Okay.
past year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good day.
Okay, there being no other public comment, the next item on our agenda is the review and approval of minutes from December 12th. Has everybody had a chance to review those? Okay, then I'll make a,
I would like to move to add to the minutes confirmation that nothing other than the appeal of CPC 132-18 was discussed during the closed session.
okay,
So
and
that's a motion.
that's a
I'll
motion.
second your motion.
And that's going to go under item number 12, correct, from the minutes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, thank you. Katrina, if you'll update those minutes to reflect, and I'm sure Dr. Cass can get you that language. All right, with that amendment to the minutes, are the minutes approved? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful. And then Katrina, if you'll just bring a copy of that for signature next month, that would be great. Thank you. All right, moving on, item 7 on our agenda, reports from city staff. APD.
Good evening. I'm going to apologize. I don't have much of a voice tonight, so sorry.
I feel you. I'm with you.
Real quick, from Internal Affairs Professional Standards, the number of dispatched calls for service in December was 39,099, which is an increase of just over 2,200 from November. Our internal cases that we reviewed in December of 2019, there were actually 9 cases that were completed and sent out for review by area commanders for possible discipline. We opened an additional 6 internally, and there were already 7 that carried over from November into December. We did close out 9 administratively for lack of foundation in December. There were 2 cases that were completely closed out in December for discipline. One was a termination case where an officer was terminated, and another one was just a letter of reprimand, which was an OBRD issue. There were 74 alerts issued for the early intervention reporting system that went out to supervisors to review the alerts of their officers. Any questions?
I have
Member
one question.
Fine.
You said administratively closed. I don't remember hearing that before, and it's a conversation that we've had about our own cases. And so I wondered what the criteria is for you for administratively closing a case.
There's actually very specific criteria listed in our SOP for administratively closing them. It states that if it's a minor violation, which is at Sanction 7 by our SOP, that can be listed as so minor in the infraction that it can just be closed out without even issuing a verbal reprimand, or that if it was opened in error, or it should have never been opened, or if it's a duplicate sanction, very similar to another one that was sustained, it will administratively close one and just sustain another one.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Dr.
I
Cass.
presume this increase from November it's 2,000 more, 2,233 more. There weren't 2,000 cases in November and 39,000 in
No,
December.
sorry, that's dispatched calls for service, not cases opened by us.
Yes, calls for service, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Great.
Feel better.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else from APD that would like to address the board? Come on down.
Hello. I'm Lieutenant Ken Johnson with the Internal Affairs Force Division, and I just want to go over the uses of force that happened in December of 2019. Do you guys have the handout that came from us? Yes. Perfect. Okay. Just for noting, there was no tactical activations reported in December, and we had 2 force events that were out of the area commands, so it actually started in city limits and then left city limits. One resulted in a use of force and one resulted in a show of force. So when you look at those numbers and you see out of area, they actually happened outside of one of the area out of the area commands completely. We had 54 total force events to include shows of force and use of force. As we break those down, we had 40 regular uses of force, 6 serious uses of force, and 8 shows of force for the entire city. I can break those down by area command further if you would like. I'll leave that at your discretion at that point.
Which would be the highest?
The highest area command is going to be the southeast, followed by the northeast. The southeast had 13 and the northeast was at 11, and then the low is 7.
And does that compare, would that be expected because the number of incidences are greater in those areas? And
Generally,
therefore-
calls for service are the highest in both the southeast and the northeast, so call volumes are historically and generally higher in those area commands where they are staffed with more officers in general based on the allocation, based on calls for service.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yes, I have one question. I've been trying to sort through SOPs recently, and I'm trying to find the SOP that deals with the tactical deployment. And do you happen to recall off the top of your head what that SOP is?
Off the top of my head, sir, I do know it's underneath of the Special Operations Division SOP. I do not have that number readily available off the top of my head, though.
Okay, thank you.
That is something that I can do and just communicate to your liaison.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from APD that would like to come on down? No? Okay, great. So next on our agenda is City Council. Hey, Julian.
Madam Chair, board members, so we are working to fill these positions on the board. We have 2 prospective members here this evening. I believe the third one is supposed to be here as well to attend their meeting as part of their requirements. And then we are actually meeting tomorrow to look for another candidate to meet with and send to the outreach committee. So we're all kind of set to be fulfilled by February. And we'll be sad to see Board Member Fine leave us as well. But we're all kind of set for February, and with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you for all that hard work. I appreciate that. And the 2 candidates we've met with are wonderful. So I'm looking forward to, you know, when they're going to be voted on at council. I know we had Councilor Sanchez pass away, and that affected your schedule.
Madam Chair, Board Member Fine. Yeah, so that kind of put a little wrench in our schedule. So they'll either be immediate action on January 22nd or introduced on January 22nd and then voted on at February 3rd. We just need to get approval from Council President on immediate action. We just haven't got that yet. So we'll see if that happens, or if not, it'll be February 3rd, definitely.
I have a question, if you don't mind. If I recall correctly, one of the stipulations for joining the board, or at least for council selecting board members, is to have a good representation of the city, and I think that includes geographically. And one of the new board members that was proposed, I believe, also lives on the west side of town, and that would make a third of the board that I know of. West Siders, is there any issue with that? Or have you guys kind of said that's okay, we're comfortable with that?
Sure. Madam Chair, yeah, I think we always shoot for 3 board members from the west side.
Okay,
That equals council districts essentially, and so we kind of, but while we're not by council districts, we try and kind of keep it like 6-3, west of the river and east of the river. It has been difficult, though, to find somebody from the southwest part of town. So, you know, the majority of the appointees are basically the northwest part of the west side. So if you know anybody in the southwest part of town that would be interested, we definitely need representation from that area. But yeah, we usually try to keep it with 3 members from the west side.
is there anything that we can do to help? I know that in the past, we've offered to Mr. Sylvan to attend CPC meetings on that side and kind of try and, or wherever there was a need, and kind of try and muster up the interest from those communities. Is that something that would be helpful here? Would you recommend that we send some
Madam Chair, yes.
bodies?
Yes, that'd be
Okay.
great.
Do we have anybody in place that's replaced Chris yet?
Yes, she's here.
Okay.
I'm not aware.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
Oh, Madam Chair, one thing I should mention, that in these appointments is the reappointment of Dr. Cass as well. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Already, huh? Okay. The fast 3 years.
I'm sorry, when was that?
Madam Chair, Dr. Cass, it'll be with the other appointments now on January 22nd or February 3rd. That'll be in
Thank
front of
you.
council.
That's assuming you want to stay on the board, right? Okay. Next, anybody from the mayor's office? Come on down, sir.
Madam Chair, actually, and board members. I'm Deputy Chief Garcia. There's one more thing we wanted to go over with APD first. I'm not speaking for the mayor's office, just for APD.
Okay.
This Saturday, Friday night, tomorrow night at midnight is when we're going live with our new use of force policies. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So our levels 1, 2, and 3, which came up with input from community members like yourselves, will be going at 10/8. The teams that are run by Lieutenant Johnston will be going out to handle levels 2 and 3 uses of force on call-out basis.
Yes,
Mention
ma'am.
something. I just want to tell you how excited I am about what the training that we had on use of force and how it will be reported. I have rarely been that impressed with how they managed that process, how they came up with a solution. I really believe that that will be a game changer, not only here for the better, but also across the country. I think it's the work that Commander Middleton and his team have done with the administration encouragement of the police department is really stellar. And I think we were all impressed by that. We're looking forward to, or the rest of the board is looking forward to seeing how that comes out in terms of cases. I really think it's stellar.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Fine, thank you very much. They've done a fantastic job, I agree, with the training. Lieutenant Johnson's done a lot of the training for the supervisors and how the force division is going to be going out with the teams, but they've done an incredible job. I had big expectations for them when they first got this project, and they've exceeded all of them, so I'm proud of them myself.
As you know, I was the one complaining about it taking so long, but I'm telling you, it was worth it. It really was. And they cannot be commended enough for what they've done.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back and just ask one more time, anybody from the mayor's office or any reports from the mayor's office? Okay. City Attorney.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Thank you for having me today. Just a few small updates. I don't recall if this had happened by our last meeting, so the court did schedule a public hearing, which is scheduled for February 11th at 9 o'clock in Judge Browning's courtroom at the federal court. And we're looking forward to as many people as we can to go to that meeting. And just today, you should have received, well, it actually was sent to Director Harness not very long ago, the serious use of force and the officer-involved shootings from last month. So you should get those in the normal course of business very soon. And there's the way it's been provided is through a link, and if you need additional time to review it, let us know, because that link lasts for 90 days.
And the link is where?
We sent that link to Director Harness.
Okay.
So, yeah. We don't have a lot of other updates at this point in time, so if you have any questions.
The hearing with Judge Browning on February 11th, is that a regular status conference update, or is that, it is? Okay.
Yes, it's the public hearing. It'll be the all-day hearing.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, great. All right, next, CPCs.
I'll pick the tall one. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Lieutenant Ferris Simmons, and at this point, the city leadership and the leadership of the Albuquerque Police Department has asked me to take over the CPC manager job that Chris Sylvan held. Chris has resigned, and his family is pursuing a new endeavor in another state, so we're very excited for him. I will also be continuing to use the administrative assistant, Jeanette Carrillo, who has been doing a really remarkably fantastic job. So I have some updates for you from December 2019. Only 2 CPCs held meetings during December because of the holiday. However, our Foothills Area Command hosted a holiday meet and greet party, which was attended by 21 people. The Southwest Area Command hosted their meeting. Theirs is earlier in the month, and their subject was shots fired. So we talked about NIBIN, the shot spotter, some of the new technology coming out, and we had subject matter experts come in and talk about what the department's doing to address some of the shots fired calls. It was attended by 23 people. 16 of those were community members, 5 APD, and 2 voting members. So I noticed that you guys are also struggling with finding people from the southwest area of town. We are as well. And I have some targeted plans to recruit and develop the Southwest CPC, so hopefully that'll help you guys as well. December 11th was our citywide CPC summit, and it was held at the Albuquerque Museum. The event was advertised citywide through all media outlets and also on cabq.gov, 6 digital billboards around town, the ONC newsletter, and all APD social media. Just as a quick baseline, our next door social media reaches 112,500 members in 436 Albuquerque neighborhoods. Our Facebook has 66,000 followers. Twitter has 88,400. Instagram, if you're young and hip, is 15,400 followers. And for our January 2020 headlines, is going to be the Southwest last night talked about the CASA and had a variety of subject matter experts. It was a very engaging conversation. It was attended by about 6 community members, and which was really a disappointment because it was a really fantastic discussion. Valley has yet to pick their topic. They're kind of bouncing around between a couple. But we're excited to hear what they choose and help facilitate that. Southeast is going to be speaking about the gang unit. Northeast will be talking about OBRDs. And I love the OBRD presentation, the on-body recording device, because our team is actually bringing cameras for the council members and people in the audience to try and turn them on, turn them off, plug them in, really see how they actually function. So it's a very interesting presentation. Foothills is going to be speaking with MDC PIO Candace Hopkins and talking about how what's going on at MDC affects our community. Northwest is going to be hosting people from the Real-Time Crime Center, and I'm always excited for meetings like that because people in the community, and Northwest is a fantastic meeting, always very well attended. They come up with great recommendations on how we can use new technology to be more effective. Currently, we have 6 recommendations in queue. 5 are awaiting the chief's approval. And in 2019, just as an overall, we had 13 recommendations submitted, of which 5 were approved. Wow. And I stand for any questions.
Yeah.
I didn't get your name. I'm sorry.
Ferris Simmons. And it's Ferris Simmons, Simmons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joanne?
Yes, ma'am.
A thought, Julian, I wanted to ask you this. There are people on our list of potential board members that may not be selected because of the geography or because of something else that obviously have expressed an interest in police oversight. So they might be good candidates, and I don't believe we've ever talked about sharing that list with you as potential for people to fill a CPC. You know, even if there's no seats available, there may be somebody who wants to get involved now. So that may be a connection you guys could benefit from.
That's a fantastic opportunity. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Board Member Fine, it may have been about 2 months ago, actually at the request of Board Member Olivas, that I send out an email to the applicant list about the CPC. So we did that maybe about 2 or 3 months ago now.
Okay.
And from what I remember, there was quite a few responses that they were going to be getting in touch with Chris Sylvan and looking into their CPC. So.
And maybe if it's proactive from your end, it would be another way of looking at it.
The thing that I had the best benefit from, and hopefully it'll benefit you guys as well, I sent out, and I'm sure many of you got the letter from me to all of this community or the Citizens Police Academy alumni asking you to participate in CPC, and I received 16 applications to our councils from that reach out.
Wonderful.
Excellent. Thank you.
So it sounds like we have a little bit of a shared problem, and it might be worth investigating, and I'll take it back to the outreach committee, but maybe just a brainstorming session. We use one of those outreach meetings as an opportunity to kind of figure out how we can get into that southwest area and really kind of canvass the area together and see what we can yield. Are you open to that?
Yes, I'm absolutely open to that. One of the other duties that was assigned to me is the APD Faith Alliance. And so at this point, and I've kind of already been working on it, I have about 475 pastoral faith house of worship leaders within the city of Albuquerque, and quite a few of those in the Southwest Area Command, which we're working on developing a strategy for that.
Wonderful. All right, well, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Any representatives from the CPCs that are here that would like to comment? Okay. Anybody from the APOA? Okay. And Director Harness?
Good evening, Chair, Honorable Board. First item, we have our first hearing regarding the 2021 fiscal budget on March 4th with the Chief Administrative Officer's office. So I will present my proposed budget to you at the February 13 board meeting for your consideration as we move forward. Regarding the budget, the City Council has bumped us from our May 14th hearing date because of the meetings for the Committee of the Whole. So council chambers aren't available for us on the 14th of May. So we have two choices available. We have either May 19th or May 21st. Which would the board prefer?
Sorry, Tuesday the 19th or Thursday the 21st?
Yes, Madam Chair, yes.
I'm not hearing any objections really to any of it.
Open to
No,
either.
I would suggest that we keep the same day of the week.
Thursday. Okay,
So then we will reserve the chambers for May 21st, and we will hold the May meeting on the 21st of May.
perfect, thank you.
While you have your calendars out, block off May 7th and May 12th evening. There will be reality-based training out at the academy, and simultaneously you will go through the firearm training simulator.
What time?
I don't have a direct time, but it will be in the evening, most likely starting at 5 to 6 o'clock.
7th and 11th?
The 7th and the 12th of May.
Okay.
And one more calendar item, the amici update. Ms. Gallegos, Shania from the chiefs, from Deputy Chief Garcia's office sent you an email regarding meeting date and time. The available times are the 22nd of January at 10:30 or at 3 p.m. or the 23rd at 2 p.m. Mr. Watley is available for all of those. Your attorney, Ms. Gooch, is unavailable on the 23rd.
'23rd, and what was the other date?
January 22nd, 10:30 a.m. or 3 p.m.
I have a question. Were they going to choose one of those times depending on the availability? I thought, or are all still available? And
Chair Galloway, member Dr. Cass, those are actually all available at this point for the meeting that is for the CPOA and MRAC combined. The only unavailability that I have so far is that Ms. Gooch is unavailable on the 23rd. But we need to let Shania know which date and time you want.
I have a slight preference for the 22nd at 10:30.
I've already replied that I'm available for any of those, so I didn't know if it was necessary for everyone to attend the same meeting or if there's only going to be one meeting. Presumably, it'll collapse to just one meeting.
Yes,
they're
Chair,
going to pick one
yes,
time.
Chair Galloway, Dr., yes, there will be just one meeting for CPOA.
I think everybody else got work commitments, right? That kind of runs right in the middle of the workday.
So
So
then-
slight preference for the 22nd at 10:30.
Okay.
If Dr. Cass is available for any of them.
All right, I'll give Shania that information, and then she'll send out the invites.
Thank you.
Same thing.
Okay. The Citizens Police Academy begins again the 25th of February. I notified APD that we need at least 4 spots. And I will be getting an updated list of the required courses and the specific dates when those courses will be offered during that Citizens Police Academy session. Our new admin will begin on the 21st of January. The mediation draft has been drafted, that's redundant, sorry. The mediation proposal has been drafted. A joint stipulation to suspend paragraph 184 and a draft of the memorandum of understanding has been sent to the parties for comment. I have no OPA or no PPRB votes to report for this period. IMR 11 period ends January 31st. I need ride-along updates for IMR 11 period. January 22nd, I will present the fourth quarter report to the City Council. Next week, you can make an appointment with the office to come and pick up your tablet. We have the software loaded, and they're back from City IT for imaging. And as Ms. Van Meter stated, I did receive the link for the Force Review Board review of use of force cases for 2. And I just tested the link and it does work, so I will forward that email to the board so that they can link to that information. It is currently set to expire in 90 days. Other than that, I stand for questions.
Yes, Member Fine.
I want to go back to your item on the budget. I have seen this as a problem over time, and I just recently heard it in our meeting, in our retreat thing that we did, and that is that there needs to be space in your budget to provide copies to board members who may not have access to that or may not want to spend the money to make copies of things. So I'd like to see you consider that in your budget part. I just want to tell you ahead of time, because, you know, when you've already assembled it and bring it to us for a conversation, I just wanted you to be able to know that that was something that should be considered, in my opinion.
Director Harness, can we get a copy of your proposed budget ahead of the meeting so that we can review it and come with any questions we may have?
Chair Galloway, I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on, item 8 on our agenda is reports from subcommittees, starting with community outreach. Joanne.
We canceled our meeting. We have had issues, as you know, of not enough board members to staff those, and I know you're going to be addressing that later. And I don't know when the next meeting's going to be because I won't be here. So I know you're going to name a new chairs in that today, so I think we'll learn more at your presentation.
Right.
The next meeting should be January 28th.
Is when it's on?
28th. What time are they scheduled for right now? 4:15.
And that's in the 106?
The basement hearing.
In the basement. Okay. Policy and Procedure Subcommittee, Dr. Cass.
Yes, so regarding PPRB and OPA, they have not met for over a month, and so there's nothing to report about those. But I got an email today that indicates that PPRB will start up again on January 15th, and the items that are going to be reviewed, or the SOPs that are going to be reviewed, are the on-body camera or on-body recording device, 2-8, inspections process, 330, Metropolitan Court Protection Unit, 1-65, restraints and transportation of individuals, 2-82, and then some OPA forms, admonishment form, updated revised crime lab form. So just to let you know that PPRB is back in operation. So as far as other items were discussed at the policy subcommittee last week, I presented a policy tracking spreadsheet, which I think we're in the process of trying to refine so that we can get input from more of the stakeholders into the policy review process. So what I did was I created a spreadsheet that includes the progress of a policy through APD's process defined by SOP 352, and then where other comments are available for us and the board to make recommendations. I also tried to include a chance for us to gather input from from CPOA and the investigators, so that when they see a policy that has some that they have some interest in, we'll be able to have it all wrapped up into one form. And Member Olivas is trying to see if we can do this in a way that allows us to get more shared access to all these forms, so that we can have a way to put in the information into a common document. Also, we had a discussion about the conduct and ethics process, which we're trying to create, and at the suggestion of Member Armio Pruitt, I wrote an outline that she's going to review about how we might proceed with that. I got it boiled down to about a page after this had expanded to about 50 pages of accessing various documents and other people's conduct and ethics. So we're still working on that, but I think what we have is plenty of boilerplate about how, about conduct and ethics processes. And I think what we need, what I would recommend, and I put this at the end of the outline, but I'll read what my recommendations would be, and I think these are things that the board should have a chance to consider as we go through this process. But I think one of the things before we can really adopt a conduct and ethics policy is we need to get some training on conduct and ethics. And so I would suggest that we look into getting some training soon on that area. And I'm open to suggestions as to who might provide that kind of training. But I think there's I think that would help us all get a common understanding of what conduct and ethics ought to be. Then I think another item that I would recommend is that we have some discussion about adopting the NACOL Code of Conduct. And if you want to find it, I think I've passed out copies, but it's also available if you go to the NACOL website. It's not hard to find. Then I think we need to create a board process, which I would call something that allows us to review members' actions in sort of the, when there's not an urgent problem going on, so that we can, it's more of a self-examination. And I think if we can have some maybe quarterly discussion, maybe it's a personnel committee, subcommittee, I think it's all, should be decided by a board consensus, but have a way of discussing whether we're on the right track as far as board conduct goes. And I think we can, if we do that in a forum where we're not dealing with a crisis, then I think we'll have a better chance of getting having a good, outcome as to, what kind of board behavior we expect, and maybe we can prevent a lot of problems by having that discussion in a calmer fashion. And then the last thing is, I think that we need to create a hearing process or adopt a hearing process. And I think the PERA process or the policies that I think I've circulated as well, at least to the policy subcommittee, deal with some of that. And I think they have an outline of a process. I think we could adopt or adapt that to our needs as well. So those would be my recommendations. And I think this is an ongoing process, and I'm just trying to bring you up to date on it. So, you have a question? Yeah.
I have two ideas for resources for training. One is the Foundation for Open Government, and the other is the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, which is housed at United Way, but it is a resource for nonprofits that are trying to build boards and those things, and they have training on ethics and conduct and those kinds of things as well. So I just wanted to offer those two resources.
Thank you. The last item I have is we voted to get a Crimes Against Children presentation at an upcoming meeting. I've contacted Commander Burke, who seems to be the appropriate person, and we've set up a meeting for next Thursday. He's out of town this week, and this was the earliest we could get together. So I told him of our deadline, and at least in the email that I sent him, and I didn't get any strenuous objections. So I presume that we will be able to hold this at our next meeting on the I believe it's whatever it is in February, 13th of February. So I'll find out more and let you know as I gather some information. So. I would also welcome any suggestions for what board members might want to hear as far as specific items that you would like to have APD cover in that briefing, and I'll pass those on to Commander Burke. So the process that's been suggested at our last policy meeting was that we would like to be walked through the steps that are taken when a child is removed from parental custody. So that would be one. If you have others, I think that's, it'd be best to get those on in advance. So.
I have a suggestion, and that is that I think that what I've seen is that most of the problems that happen with successful intervention have been in the handoff stages between CYFD and APD and the school system, perhaps. So it's the handoff interactions that I think are problematic. So I think the community needs to learn what are the challenges in that, and what are they doing to address it.
And you're talking of the handoff of the case itself without,
well, or the
it isn't
interaction
necessarily
between, because I think a lot of the cases we've seen in the newspaper and before this board have been ones that are troubled by handoff failures.
All right,
between them. So.
That's all I have. Yes, I have one more thing, and that is we have now a new meeting time. It's going to be 4:30. It'll be in the third floor conference room of the Plaza del Sol building. And the next meeting is February 6th.
Are you maintaining that first Thursday of the month?
Yes, it's the first Thursday, but at a different time.
Yes, Member Olivas.
Thank you for doing this.
I just wanted to offer a suggestion to the board in planning for that February meeting in order to maximize our time for that presentation. We'll also be hearing Director Harness's budget. I presume we'll have some cases that'll be heard there and even potentially some use of force cases depending on what the board decides to do. So it's just my suggestion that it may be prudent for us to truncate or completely remove reports from subcommittees for the month of February and try to limit other action in that meeting so that we can maximize the amount of time that we can spend on those issues.
I have to take a look at our policies and procedures and ordinance in CASA because there are certain things that we're required to cover during our meetings, but at least that puts a flag to make sure that I'm looking at that. So thank you for that. I have one question. Julian, does City Council have somebody that they use for training on ethics and conduct and whatnot? That might be a resource for us as well. I assume they have to go through this as they're onboarding as well.
Madam Chair, not that I'm aware of. I think our legal analyst in the office probably does most of that. I don't think we use like an outside contractor or anything.
Okay, just thought I'd ask. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cass. Next is case review. I'll go on ahead and say that with the chair's absence and a member being ill the day of case review, that committee did not meet at their last meeting. We'll talk about days and times that might work best when we get back to staffing committees here in a little bit. And then Personnel Committee also did not meet last month, and next meeting's to be determined because, again, just some shuffling that needs to go on given our limited board size and requirements that we do not exceed the number of board members present to become an OMA violation. Next item on our agenda, number 9, discussion and possible action. 2018 semi-annual report for January through June. And then it'll dovetail into July through December.
Chair Galloway and Honorable Board, yes. Items A and B, the rewrite of those semi-annual reports is in SharePoint for your review and comment to be on February's agenda for approval. When we got Mr. Abbasi on board, his first task was to review those previous semi-annual reports prepared by ISR, and he has done pretty much a complete rewrite of those reports. I think the work product is much better, and we're much more comfortable with the numbers based upon his research. And so they are there for you to review and comment and approve for next month.
Okay, so we'll add that to the agenda for February for the board to take action on. So if everybody can please review those ahead of that meeting and provide any questions to Director Harness that you may have, that would be wonderful. Yes, sir.
Mr. Harness, I have a question for you on why are those reports, I'm just trying to get some background, not accusing anybody of anything, but why are those, so those are the 2018 reports, why are those just now coming before the board?
Chair Galloway and Member Olivas, a previous iteration of those reports were before the board a few months ago, but they were incomplete at that point. And while completing those, we hired Mr. Abbasi, and so I had him take a look at those and redo them. So that's why they're coming back to the board.
Okay. Oh, yes, Ms. Gooch.
Chair Galloway and Member Olivas, before we move on down the agenda, there was a question about if the board could suspend or not have subcommittee reports at the next regularly scheduled meeting. Your policies and procedures currently state that you shall report at your next regularly scheduled meeting what happens at your subcommittees in that order. Doesn't mean that the board couldn't take a vote at this meeting or at the next meeting to suspend that rule in the interest of ensuring that there's adequate time for the other items that the board anticipates having to address at the next monthly meeting.
I think I'm going to go on ahead and save that for the next board meeting. If we decide that there's nothing of significance that comes up in the individual committee meetings, if they feel as though they can wait for a month to report back to the board, then I think we'll do that then. But just in case something comes up, we might want to reserve that opportunity to discuss. Okay, next item on our agenda, board's use of legal counsel. Member Olivas, I believe this is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board was presented with a invoice from Director Harness for the month of October for legal services rendered in that 1 month period. To me, I felt that this was not a particularly good use of funds, and these funds do come out of the CPOA budget. By my math, this was roughly 1% of the entire agency budget that was spent in 1 month. And these were generally on requests that were made by individual board members in an effort to try and restrict that spending and ensure that the board is judiciously observing what it spends its money on or spends the agency's money on. I would like to make a motion to restrict the use of legal counsel by individual members of the board. No member, including the board chair or subcommittee chairs, shall contact or solicit the advice of board contracted legal counsel without the consent of the full board in a properly noticed meeting. As of this time, enactment of the motion, legal counsel should not participate in any meetings other than meetings of the full board and subcommittee meetings of the Personnel Committee, if requested in advance by the chair of that subcommittee. Legal counsel may participate in other subcommittee meetings if requested and authorized by the full board in a properly noticed public meeting. The executive director shall maintain the authority to request legal opinions or legal advice on behalf of the board as needed. This motion shall remain in effect until rescinded by the board, with the expectation that this shall occur when a full policy on the use of contract legal counsel by the board and its individual members is adopted and implemented by the board. Sorry, that was a long motion.
It is a long motion, but fortunately we have it in text, so we can use it if we need it.
I second.
You have a second? Okay, I'm going to open this up for discussion, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to point out a couple of errors in that. The first being that the invoice that was submitted was for the months of October and November, so it's a 2-month billing period. The second being that contractually, the attorneys are to take guidance from the chair, the executive director of the agency if they have a need, and the full board. And there was a third one in there, but I don't recall what that is at the moment, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. So I don't know that we can actually utilize your motion as written or as presented, because we do have a contract with our attorneys that have very specific things aligned. Number 5?
First of all, I underscore everything you said. I believe it's in your contract that you are, because we talked about this. You know, we didn't want you being pulled in all directions by individual board members. So that's why, and there's a reality, and we've seen this happen several times in my tenure here, where some action needed to happen by the chair or some information needed to be gotten from the lawyer in between board meetings. So having worked with this for a while, for what it means to wait a month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks in order to get an answer, I think it's, the board decided, or there is a vote on record, that the executive director and the chair, in lieu of a full board, could make, and no one else, could make a decision to ask for legal advice that couldn't wait to the, till the next meeting. And so I think that's already there. Ms. Gooch, can you enlighten us, where is that? Is it in our policy and procedure, your contract, where is that?
Chair Galloway and Vice Chair Fine, it's in the contract. The contract that the agency through the city has with my law firm. And I believe that it's accessible and that the board has copies. I'm not sure if, when the last version was presented or where it is, but it should be something, it's a public record that's on file with the city.
So if that's true, if my recollection is accurate, that that's what it says in your contract, how is it that we had the non-chair and the non-board and the non-executive director asking for your work?
Chair Galloway and Vice Chair Fine. It occurred in, well, various ways. And so one is I should have, when I received those calls, those requests, said you need to call the chair. And then the chair needs to call me. So that is on me. And I take full responsibility for not guiding the chair, the members to the chair. And notwithstanding that, the majority, if not, well, the majority, I think is a fair amount to say, of the information and requests were brought to the knowledge of the chair, and all of the information and requests that the firm has been asked to do have been disseminated to both the agency and every member of this board. In response to the statement, Vice Chair Fine, about the timely need for some issues, there are deadlines set by law, statutes, other areas that require sometimes prompt and immediate action. But the contract does say that the full board, obviously on a vote, can direct counsel for whatever it is that the board needs. It also says that the chair can do those things as well. I think that it would be helpful, if the board were so inclined, to have a policy among the board as to if there is a question that a board member has, whether it is something that can wait to a monthly meeting or if it is a timely, time-sensitive project or issue, that the board have a policy that you contact the chair, and if the chair is unavailable, maybe the vice chair would be designated in those instances, because as a volunteer board, you're not expected to be on call 24/7. You get to go on vacation and you get to be unavailable. So the idea would be that you have a backup. And through that, the hope would be that I, for one, am not having awkward calls where I say, that's great, but we have to get the chair on the phone too. The idea would be that the chair would be reaching out to me with whoever it is, as long as it's not a quorum, or the chair would vet that and then decide and come to legal counsel in the chair's discretion if it was warranted. The possible caveat with that, and I think that the contract covers it, is that in the event that the problem is directly related to the chair, for instance, and I'm, just in hyperbolic ideas. If the problem was with the chair, the question would be, well, what do we do, board, to get access to our legal counsel? And that could be done in one of two ways. One, it could wait until the next regularly scheduled meeting. It could be put on the agenda, and the full board could actually vote on that to ensure that a rogue chair is not undermining or hurting access to the board for whatever it is that the board decides it needs. It also could be that that's enough, that unless, of course, you have a rogue chair that refuses to put that on your agenda, because it does mean that the agenda is formed by your chair. I hope it's never come to that in my tenure with you all. I hope it never happens, but stranger things occur in the future, could have happened in the past. But the way that the contract is written, it should be like that. And I will endeavor and make sure that if I get these calls and it's not from the chair, to help redirect. It would be helpful to me and my staff if there is a policy that the board has that helps guide all of you and the board members moving forward as to how to access.
But my point is that we did vote on this for your contract. We did say this, and I absolutely support what you're trying to get to. I support it so much, we voted on it already. And I think that it's a legitimate request. If I were in your shoes, Tina, I would not want everybody coming at me at once, because you can't control the spending, and you have to be able to control the spending. So I'm comfortable if it's the executive director, the chair of the board, or the full board, if it's possible. And it should wait for the full board if it can. So that, to me, makes sense. But it is 2 months, and we did vote on this already. So if we're going to change that, we should know going into the change that we are changing an existing decision we made.
I don't think that that's something that we can do right now. We would have to wait until your contract renews to make that change.
Chair Galloway, I'm not sure I understand what it is that would be
If we wanted to
changed.
perhaps entertain the motion as
A
stated.
change of your contract.
Yeah, that would change up the parameters of your contract, our contract with you. Then that would need to be, I assume, it would need to occur at the time of the renewal of your contract.
Chair Galloway, I'd have to look at the terms about if there's an amendment period or an allowability for that. I haven't reviewed it in depth to see if there is a possibility, but I can confirm, yes, when the contract is up for renewal, those terms and provisions are absolutely and should be on the table for the board's consideration.
And if I recall, that is in July?
Chair Galloway, that's correct.
Okay, so we could, well, let me pause. We also just incidentally, we have a $100,000 contract that was voted on. We had to increase the allotted amount. That was point number 3 that I forgot earlier. Was it at our last renewal of your contract? It was, right? So even if those numbers that we were presented seem high, they wouldn't touch that $100,000, assuming that was the course of normal spending every month, we would still be under budget on that. Any more discussion? I see you holding your mic.
Yes,
Absolutely, Dr. Katz.
So I think there's something that needs to be clarified, and that is, I'm looking at the contract, or at least the part that deals with scope of services, and it does mention on several occasions, the contractor shall provide legal advice to the CPOA as requested by the POB at its meetings, and shall review agendas, et cetera. And then another item is, as directed by the board chairperson, the contractor shall advise the POB and the CPOA administrative office as to any legal matters relating to CPOA's duties. Another item E is, as directed by the board chairperson, the contractor shall conduct legal research. And then, and there's more. And then item F, the contractor shall provide training on legal matters as directed by the board chairperson. Well, this seems to me what the language of that says to me is that the board chairperson is relaying the information to the legal.
That's right.
They're the point of contact.
Yep.
So we need to look underneath for the authority of the board chairperson to make these directives. And I think that's something that we need to clarify. So if you look at our own policies and procedures, it explicitly calls out the powers and the duties of the chairperson. And in terms of the item which I think is most relevant to this argument is, or this discussion, is that, which is item 9 in the powers and duties, and which is the chairperson shall sign all resolutions, letters, and official documents on behalf of the board. So but it has to be, first of all, on behalf of the board, which means there has to be some motion by the board in order to take an action. And that action would be to ask for a legal opinion or to, take some other legal action, but that we're asking our counsel to do. But I think it always has to come from the board, except in maybe some urgent situations, or if the director, I think the executive director has the authority as well. But as far as board actions are concerned, or, directives from the chair have to start with the board. So, I mean, I think that's, that needs to be, clarified in this motion. And as far as the relevant, parts of, my part in this bill, I think is a good example of something that I could have handled differently. And I think it's to your point, Ms. Gooch, about asking a question that I shouldn't have asked, which was, is there a legal reason for canceling meetings, or can we cancel meetings for some legal reason? Well, the answer to that question is not a legal answer. It's an administrative procedure answer, and the answer is found in Robert's Rules of Order. So you just look beneath. The ordinance says we follow, among other things, we follow Robert's Rules of Order when it comes to holding meetings and running meetings. And Robert's Rules doesn't say you can cancel a meeting. It says that if you have a meeting scheduled and no one shows up, and you don't have a quorum, you adjourn the meeting. So that's different than canceling a meeting in advance. So the answer to that isn't a legal question, or isn't a legal answer. It's an administrative process. And so I think we can answer those, and it's, and this now gets back to, I'll take it on myself personally, I should not have asked this question. I should have said, we need to follow a better process for holding meetings, and it's found in Robert's Rules of Order. And that's the answer to this question. So, and all the rest of the board members should have read their Robert's Rules of Order and recognize that this was, it was inappropriate, to cancel a meeting. So that's my, that's my position. I think we're, all right, I'll quit there.
Let me just ask real quick, Tara or Leonard, do either of you have anything you want to contribute to this conversation?
It appears to me from what Ms. Gooch said that we already have stated in our contract that the point of contact is the chair and the director and the full board. I think if we need an internal policy to make sure that everybody is aware that that's the way we operate, then we should create an internal policy. I'm not sure we need all of this that's in here, because I think it's already spelled out somewhere. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Leonard, are you good? Joanne, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I agree with what he's saying, but I think that if it's possible to wait to the next board meeting, that's great, but we have to be prepared for that times that it's not. And that is the authority we as a board are giving to the chair. And it's the responsibility of the chair to know whether or not a legal question is Robert's Rules or something else. And we need a legal opinion. That's why the filter is set up with the chair and with the executive director. So I think we've solved this problem. I don't think it's the same problem we thought it might have been. And I think I think there needs to be a what if something happens in between board meetings. And I think that we've already agreed to how that should be. So.
Okay, did you want to close it out?
Yes, so I wanted to address a few of those issues that were raised with this. So I do appreciate that our council has taken some responsibility and that the contract does provide that there should be a little more coaching folks onto the right path there. And I definitely think that as a board, when this comes up in July, we need to clarify in that contract, perhaps that specifically, that if individual members do attempt to contact for legal opinions, that there's a proper channel for that. One issue that was raised by council was the issue of a rogue chair not allowing items to be placed on the agenda, or not allowing legal issues to pass through council. And so I'm going back to our Robert's Rules of Order training that we were all in here. And this board derives its authority from majority rule. That's how Robert's Rules of Order works. And per those rules, we, the majority of the board, excluding the chair, can always call a special meeting and create our own agenda for that special meeting outside of something that the chair would allow or want. So I think we do have that ability, and I don't think we should allow that to, essentially scare us into thinking that we need to, we need to retain this individual authority because else we have no other option if there's a rogue chair that won't allow us to ask a question or won't let us talk to counsel. I don't think that's really accurate to say that. Another issue that was raised here is that, there's already a policy on this. It's in the contract. So why do we need another policy? And I think that's exactly the point. We're new members over here on this side, and I've never seen this contract, and maybe it's somewhere in there that, with some digging I can find and I should find, and now I will. But given that contract is a contract for the legal counsel, not for board members. And I think that as we talk about board member expectations, board member conduct, board member ethics, this is a key part of that. It's not just the responsibility of counsel to tell us, no, you can't talk to me. It's actually our job first. And so I think that I certainly wasn't placing the blame on counsel for this, although I think that's a backstop here. But we have to take ownership of this problem, and that our own policies and procedures don't restrict use of legal counsel in any way. And so when we say that there is a policy somewhere, I suppose that's technically correct, but where does it explicitly say that? When I'm a new member and I'm coming on board, how am I supposed to know what the board's policies are on the use of legal services are? And then finally, sort of circling back to the whole idea of the chair controlling access to legal counsel, and I think we have to look at what member Dr. Cass talked about here, which is that the chair is only a mouthpiece for the board. Again, back to Robert's Rules of Order training, Chair 101 is the chair is the referee. They're here to make sure that things are fair, that people play fair, the rules are followed. The chair is not an executive. Our executive would be Director Harness, who also retains the authority to use legal counsel or request legal counsel in the event that there was a serious incident or something that required a timely use of legal counsel. So, we can imagine if we need to have a letter drafted and sent to the judge in our case, and we can't meet, well, first of all, we can call a special meeting and do it the right way, the way that we're supposed to do it, per our policies and procedures and per the ordinance, or our executive director also retains that authority, as far as I'm aware, to request some of those services. So I continue to think that this motion is very valid, and I don't think that it in any way infringes on the contract that we have with Sutton, because this is only a restriction to our individual members, and even though it does, in word, restrict the ability of the chair to use legal services, I would argue that that restriction was already there, given what Robert's Rules of Order imposes on us and what our own policies and procedures in our ordinance does. So I would urge my colleagues to support this motion, and I think that it has full merit, and I think that we owe it to the people of the city and the police department to show them that we are going to be good stewards of their funds, and that the board is always going to speak as a board, not as individuals, not as a chair, but as a board. And when we agree on something, that's when it goes to council. Otherwise, it needs to follow a channel.
Can I ask a clarifying
Well, just
question?
one point. There was a comment that you made that is inaccurate. The comment about calling special meetings being a majority vote thing, I believe that there is something that says that is, will you tell us what it says?
Chair Galloway, yeah. Member Olivas is correct. Your policies and procedures, if if I put my head that way and try to read, no one will hear me. Special meetings may be called by the chairperson or a majority of the members upon 3 days' notice. There's also a petitioning process that 1,000 or more civilians of the city of Albuquerque signing a petition can require or dictate that this board have a special meeting. So that is correct. The one thing that I have to get to the bottom of that I can't answer right now is that the contract doesn't actually specify that legal counsel takes direction from the executive director. The only part of the contract that references the executive director is that any of the work product that my firm provides to the board is also provided to the agency through the director. So I'm not saying that's not allowed. I'm just saying I have no authority to support that one way or the other, and the contract doesn't say that. So I want to bring that to the board's attention so that it very well could be right. I just don't have anything I haven't done the research on that to tell you one way or the other. The contract doesn't mention the executive director.
Was there another question?
I just want to clarify what the difference is between the motion that's on the floor and the idea of just doing something that's added to the policies and procedures of ours that clarifies the behavior that's expected from board members relative to this issue. Is there a difference between that idea and your idea?
I think this is an important motion to consider, and I would move that we table it until, we table it and consider it at a future meeting, next meeting. But I think there's a number of things that should be, scrutinized in the motion, and I'm in support of the concept, but I think it needs a little bit of work, and I think that could happen if we delayed or tabled it until next meeting. So I move that we table this motion.
Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor now, so we need to do something with that.
He can withdraw it.
Right, but we need to do something with it.
Okay, I'll move to withdraw the motion, and I would request that it be placed on the agenda for the February meeting.
Noting it now.
Should I do the other motion? That's a motion.
February meeting?
I think my table is a motion.
Do we need to vote through
You gotta
that?
carry his motion first,
Well, he's withdrawn his motion,
and then you still got to carry it.
but he's withdrawn it.
Okay,
So there's no
vote
more
now.
motion anymore.
okay.
Unless we want to, I guess, officially move to table
Now,
it.
what you do is take his motion to table it.
Yeah, and that's what I just said. If we want to do that, otherwise I'm noting that we're just going to put it
You're
on.
the chair, so whatever you want to do. Did you get a
Dr.
second?
Cass, do you want to make that motion, or do you want me to just put it on?
I move that we table the motion. I
Okay.
believe.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do you want to bring the second one? You're more than welcome to. You want to wait? Yeah.
And I think it's relevant. So the second motion that I want to make on this issue, I think is relevant, particularly for what we may consider in February. So I would like to make a motion to ask the executive director for a full report on the historical use of contract legal counsel by the board and agency. And I'd also like to see the director make recommendations to the board on developing a policy to effectively utilize and appropriate the use of contract legal counsel by the board and agency.
Can I ask you to make just one amendment to that?
Second.
Second, okay. Can I ask you to make just one amendment, and that is to do that in a closed session so that we don't inadvertently waive privilege as we're going through the analysis of what our legal counsel has been? Because there's been quite a few things that are not subject to open meetings.
So I'm not asking to directly discuss cases or counsel that was given. I'm asking for basically trends. You know, what are we spending monthly? What are we appropriating for this on a year-over-year basis? Are we under budgeting? Are we over budgeting?
Just cash?
Yeah, I don't
Not
think we
content?
need to get into content now.
Okay.
Month by month, that type of thing, I think is useful to know if there's trends, but no,
Okay.
we're not asking for case by case. I would clarify that point.
Thank you.
I'm not asking for.
So then we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay,
I have
motion
a
carries.
question on that. Do you think that's doable, Director Harness, to have that to us maybe a little bit before the next meeting?
Chair Galloway, Member Olivas, I'm not quite sure exactly what sort of accounting you want. We have the monthly invoices that come through budgeting and are reviewed and approved. So what time frame are you requesting? How far back? Do you want to look at just this fiscal year? Do you want to look at the prior fiscal year? I'm not sure exactly what information you're looking for.
I think my intent was to leave some of that up to you as far as sort of giving us a historical snapshot of are things changing, are things staying relatively the same? I don't think that 1 year is going to be enough for that, but I don't think we need, 10 years at the same time. I think I just want to get the idea of are things changing? Does that make sense?
Yes, well, I'm sorry, Chair Galloway, Member Olivas. Yeah, I guess you're looking for trends. This is the second year that we've contracted with this particular firm, and it's really, I mean, I can get you the numbers and I can say month by month, but it's really very situational based upon IPRA or OMA or any of those other legal issues which we constantly face as an agency, as opposed to the issue, as you described it in your previous motion, for what I would consider to be position papers based upon certain situations within the board. So I will, I'll get the monthly accounting and I'll have that for you.
I have one thing to add that's a historical thing, that's a fact. So there's only about 4 years of legal counsel. In the previous iteration of this body, the oversight process, the board was expected to use the city attorney's office. In the first year that this board was constituted, we decided that was obviously not in our best interest or in the interest of the community to do that. So we solicited more funds from the city council to have an independent lawyer for that reason. And we've had 2 contracts, just so you have, one with a different firm and one with this firm. Okay, just so you have those facts.
Okay, I'm going to go on ahead and call for a break. Our dinner is here, so we'll come back and pick up side 2 of this agenda. Can I have a motion to break?
Are we going to do this?
We're going to do it afterwards.
Oh, okay.
I move we take a dinner break.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.